Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over 10 players that I think you need to absolutely run and get from your waiver wire before your friends do. You do not want these guys going up against you in the upcoming weeks because it could lose you your matchup. Before we do get into this one, I actually want to encourage you guys to hit that subscribe button like always and drop a like on the video at the end if it did help you out. Without further ado, we're going to hop right into it. First up, SAMAJE PERINE. Joe Mixon exited this game with a concussion. Very unfortunate for Joe Mixon owners, but thankfully, if you saved up your waiver dollars, if you have a good waiver spot and you do have Joe Mixon, he might be out next week. I would run over, get SAMAJE PERINE, plop him in that spot. You should be fine. PERINE is actually a very good pass catcher, so I don't think you're losing anything going from Joe Mixon to PERINE. Not as good of a runner, not gonna lie, but he had a great game here. 30.2 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Only thing I really don't like about the matchup next week is gonna be the Tennessee Titans. They are a very tough run defense, so I don't know. I'm not expecting another 30-point performance out of SAMAJE, but he could do the job in that 1 week replacement for Joe Mixon. And also, if you're going to spend a lot of money on this guy, if you're in a waiver dollar league, don't spend an obnoxious amount because this is going to be a 1 week only play. All right, Joe Mixon comes back from this concussion protocol. He's the starter. It's not even a question. So don't think that SAMAJE PERINE has another good game maybe against Tennessee and he becomes the starter or they split the backfield. It's not going to happen. This is a Joe Mixon backfield. All right, so don't get it twisted. Next up on this list, we have BURKS. Now, BURKS has been battling injury pretty much this whole season. Since week 4, hasn't been healthy. This Denver game in week 10, he had 5.4 points. Not the best game in the world, but he really exploded against Green Bay on Thursday night with 18.1 fantasy points, 8 targets, which was the most on the team, 111 yards. That's a good game, especially for a Titans pass catcher. Now, you're looking at this Titans team and you're saying, geez, you got Ryan Tannehill or you got Malik Willis, both of which are not the best passers in the world. So that's why I'm a little cautious on even, starting BURKS on a week-to-week basis. But he does look very promising. This guy looks like a real athlete. I like what we're seeing out of him. He's got some favorable matchups coming up. I can't lie, especially when it gets to week 14. Jacksonville, the Chargers, Houston, and then Dallas is a tough matchup to end off the fantasy football season. But hey, this guy is definitely worth a roster spot. I think you should go pick him up before someone else does, and maybe they play him week 14 through 16 and he has good games and that could win people their matchups. So do what you want, but I would definitely pick him up. Next up on this list, we have DEMARCUS, and he is probably the least known name on this list. No shade to him whatsoever, but he hasn't put too many good fantasy point performances up in a row, which is the only reason I think he hasn't been picked up yet. But I did notice one thing. In week 8 against Tampa Bay on Monday night, I kept, watching the game. I'm seeing this guy go down the field. He clearly looked like the best receiver on this team. And I'm like, why have I never heard of DEMARCUS? All right, why is he not getting involved more? He had 6 catches for 64 yards in that game against Tampa Bay. 12.4 PPR fantasy points. This past week against Carolina, 9 catches, 128 yards on 9 targets, 21.8 fantasy points. Now, I do need to see a little bit more consistency before I'm going to start a guy like DEMARCUS on my team, because Mark Andrews wasn't completely healthy. We know this for a fact. He was battling an injury, just came back. This was his first game. I don't know if he was on a limited snap count. I don't know what the deal was. Still ended with 12 PPR fantasy points, but I'm sure Mark Andrews is the focal point of this offense. Nothing is going to change about that, but I think DEMARCUS is definitely worth a watch. If you're not going to pick him up, definitely keep him on your radar for future weeks, but I'd say give him a little stash right now in case he does great things as the weeks go on. Next up at number 4 here, we have RACHAAD, and this is an easy one for me. I don't think I really have to explain too much why to pick this guy up. He is coming off a bye week, so people will see that on their fantasy radar now, okay? So when you go into a week after the bye week, you're going to see the fantasy projections into next week on ESPN, Yahoo. Doesn't matter what league you're playing in. Doesn't matter what site you're using, for a good reason. He might take over Leonard Fournette in Tampa Bay, so I would definitely be putting in a claim for RACHAAD, only rostered in 34.5% of leagues. But the thing is, after that bye week, you could have got him last week for probably minimal waiver dollars, but this week he's going to be at the top of everybody's priority list. That's just how it goes when people come back from a bye and they can see their projected points now. I still think he's worth getting. I really do. He looks great as a pass catcher, looks great as a runner. last week. 22 carries, 105 yards. Didn't catch any passes in that game because they were winning for the most part, but he's got the potential. I'm telling you right now, get this guy before it's too late. Rachaad White is going to be a great player for hopefully years to come for the Bucks. Next up on this list, we have Darius Slayton, and I hate to shift the focus right to another guy, but Wan'Dale Robinson was having potentially the game of his life, looking absolutely amazing out on the field until he hurt his right knee. So prayers up to Wan'Dale Robinson, but that only leaves one guy in New York that's a solid pass catcher, and it's Darius Slayton. And I'm not going to lie, these past 4 games for Slayton, 14.8, 11.6, 18.5, 13.6 in PPR leagues. This is all with Wan'Dale Robinson starting. So now that Wan'Dale's not even in the question, he was seen on crutches after the game, by the way, so I don't think he's coming back anytime soon. Darius Slayton is the #1 option here in New York and basically the only option. So I'm going in on Darius Slayton. I'm picking him up. He's shown the consistency. He got 10 targets this past week against Detroit. Everything you like to see in a player. I'm going up and I'm picking Darius Slayton up right when waivers open this week. I'm not gonna lie to you. Next up on the list here, we have a guy that I was very, very high on going into week 11 against the Chargers. It was Isaiah Pacheco. He's still available in, let's see how many leagues here. 43.2% of leagues he's rostered in. So he's available in 56.8% of leagues still. You guys should go get this guy because I'm telling you right now, he is a monster. 15 rushes, 107 yards against the Chargers. The problem is that they do not use him in pass catching situations whatsoever. And it's so frustrating to me. And I understand why they do it because Jerick McKinnon is such a better blocker than him at this stage in his career, but Pacheco will develop. He will become the lead running back in Kansas City. I know he already is now, but he's going to be that every down running back eventually in his career. I 100% believe that. He's going to be great for years to come. If you are in a standard league, let me get this totally clear. Standard leagues, this guy needs to be rostered 1000%. It's not even a question in my mind. If it's a standard league, go get this guy as your #1 priority. If this is a PPR league that you're in, like I'm in, he's a little farther down the list. Because like I said, Jerick McKinnon is taking all the passing down work, which at this stage of his career, like I said, makes complete sense, but it just kills the PPR fantasy value. There's so many running backs that don't run as good as Isaiah Pacheco on the ground, but they'll get you more fantasy points in PPR just because their catching value is so much higher than his. So I'd still be picking him up either way. Just don't know if I'm totally starting him in PPR leagues. Standard leagues, get this man now. Start him next week. Get him. I want him on all my standard league teams after this week. Next up on the list, we have Nico Collins, and Nico Collins put up another 5-catch performance against the Commanders where they were getting absolutely whopped the entire game. This was a horrible, horrible performance out of the Houston Texans. It was just absolutely disgusting. And you know whose defense I'm going up against? The Commanders. You know, they take back a pick 6. Great. They get 40,000 sacks in this game against the Texans. Great. Just my fantasy luck recently. But anyways, aside from the little rant there, 7 targets this week, 5 catches, 48 yards for Nico Collins. 9.8 PPR fantasy points. If we're being totally honest, it can't get any worse. It really can't get any worse. This was the worst game that they'll experience all year. I fully believe that. They could not do crap the entire time on offense. It was absolutely disgusting. I think Nico Collins is worth the roster spot because if you're going to have a floor of 9.8, I mean, obviously there's the chance that the Texans, out of all teams, don't score any points at all. That's completely possible. I think this is the lowest he's going to score for the rest of the season. I think he's the wide receiver 1/2 behind Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks, you know, getting a little more involved, even though he doesn't want to be there whatsoever. Nico Collins, there's just so much more to prove there. So I would definitely roster him up as soon as you can. Next up on the list, and still not rostered in 60% of leagues somehow, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Another good performance against a stingy Buffalo Bills defense. 5 catches, 61 yards. Finally found the end zone for the first time this year, which is good to see. Came out with 17.1 PPR fantasy points. Guys, this is one of those players just like Amari Cooper. I'll talk about Amari Cooper in a couple videos this week, I believe, coming up. I have him on my radar for sure after that massive game against Buffalo. I think both of these guys could thrive at the end of the year with Deshaun Watson coming back. I would definitely roster Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think this is a situation similar. Don't quote me on this, but a similar situation to Miami, where you have Tyreek absolutely going nuts every week, and then you have Waddle going nuts. When Deshaun Watson comes back, tell me this doesn't look like a situation where Amari Cooper is going to go crazy and Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to go crazy. I'd be rostering both these guys if you can. Next up on the list, we have Latavius Murray, and I am not the biggest fan of the Denver Broncos. Anybody on this team, immediately when, you know, a YouTuber, anybody says, go pick up this guy on the Broncos, I don't want to watch a Broncos game. That's my main problem. I don't want to watch the Broncos play. But Latavius Murray, 3 out of the last 4 games, over 10 fantasy points in PPR leagues at least. He does get pretty involved in the passing game, so he's not a bad pickup. He scored against Las Vegas, 17 carries for 49 yards. Not great at all, but his schedule coming up isn't the worst. You got Carolina, Baltimore, Kansas City, Arizona, the Rams, and then Kansas City again. I mean, it's him and Melvin Gordon in that backfield. Melvin Gordon had about 12 fantasy points. Latavius had 17.2 because he found the end zone. This is a bit of a split backfield, and I would lower my expectations quite significantly because of that. But I still think, you know, if you need to play a guy, you're down a guy next week in week 12, somebody has a bye week, you can plug in Latavius Murray and he might get you a touchdown, maybe like 15 fantasy points. You'll take that all day. Last but not least, here is a guy where he definitely needs more time to develop, but I would roster him in deeper leagues, especially this week. Maybe you're holding on to him for the long term. Maybe in week 15, week 16, week 17, he finally starts to just absolutely go crazy for this team. We're talking about Kyren Williams on the Los Angeles Rams. You know, this week, 7 carries, 36 yards. He had 1 catch for 8 yards. But he was clearly the backup running back to Cam Akers. We did see Darrell Henderson basically get phased out of this offense, which is good for Kyren Williams owners, maybe signaling that if he does continue to improve, he will pass Cam Akers and become the lead back. I think Cam Akers had 14 carries for 50 yards, and that was his entire day. So Kyren Williams actually outscored Cam Akers, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty good considering it's his 2nd game back from injury. I mean, I'll take that all day. I'm rostering this guy just on the off chance that he does explode later on in this season. Anybody on the Rams, though, I have to put a big caution flag there because this team is just ugly to watch. This team is really bad to watch, especially no Cooper Kupp on this offense. Another one of those teams like the Broncos where I'm like, I got to turn this game on at 4:25 and I got to watch the Rams. Anyways, guys, let me know what you thought of these waiver wire pickup ads. Are you going to go out and get them? Are you not going to listen to me? Totally up to you guys. Let me know in the comment section below. And of course, if you did enjoy, drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Catch you in the next one. Peace.